Yes. Cool. Thank you. Oh, is this the click? This is the click.
Yep, that's your click.
All right. All right. Good. Good. All right. Hi. This is my talk. 20 years of Doom modder. How making stuff for Doom taught me more about creating things than about map design. All right. So, is this? This doesn't work. Hold on.
Yeah. Is it not working? 2 seconds.
Yeah. I think you have to click on the.
There you go.
Okay. Good. So, who the heck am I? I'm Matt Tropiano. I'm an American from New Jersey, and I'm 32 years old. And I map and make mods in Doom and Doom Engine related games, going on about 20 years now, which is more than half my life. I also contribute kind of frequently to a podcast called Doom Radio, where we talk about that sort of thing. If you follow the Doom modding community, you may have played something that I contributed to or made. Though if my name is familiar to VideoBrains attendees, you may have heard it from this.
Matt Tropiano, painstakingly crafting heart-filled sound effects to give the world of Shapeland life, as well as mapping, project management, and so many other things.
That's a talk called Doom is an Art Scene by Jay Mickle. You absolutely have to watch it, but not for this talk. This is a talk about Doom, but actually it's more about creating things. Now, growing up, I was a bit of a shy, introverted kid. I had friends and family, but I mostly went to their place to play video games. And I played lots of video games. But I've always wanted to make my own video games. I didn't have a computer or any programming skills, so I wrote up game ideas and maps and mazes on notebooks and like pieces of paper and stuff like that. But when I finally got a computer, I played lots of games on that. Success guaranteed. But I was only truly interested in the games that had built-in editors, games like Load Runner or games like Jetpack, aka Load Runner with a jetpack. But the game that really wowed me was Wolfenstein 3D. And this was a game that it was like an amazing virtual world that, just supercomputers can make, but in my computer. And but it had a problem because there was no built-in editors or anything like that. So I settled for my old fallback, making maps on paper. And I even sent copies of these maps to Apogee and id Software, thinking they could make a game out of it. And I only got a catalog back, not even a letter. So it would have been nice. But I didn't give up. So I got a better computer around the end of 1994, and it looked almost like that, and I think it was the same brand. And with it, I had Doom, and I played that game to death, like just Doom. And I wish there was a way to make my own maps, because notebook paper and my imagination just weren't cutting it anymore. But then I found this book, and it's the Doom Hacker's Guide by Hank Lukert, and it came with a CD of editing tools. So I thought, wow, finally. My prayers are answered, right? So, gotta confess something. It's pretty easy to make a Doom map. I mean, Doom is simple enough that you can make something really cool for it in a very short amount of time. And it scales really well with the effort that you put into them. This is Ancient Aliens by Paul Skillsaw DeBryan. Once this comes out, you absolutely have to play it. It's crazy. Here's how you can make a map. Step 1, make a box. Step 2, stick more boxes on that box. Step 3, add details. This was the first map I ever made. Note the careful placement of the green torches, that menacing cyber demon that's about to kill you, the hanging Commander Keens that add that little splash of color, the muddy brown texture work that ties it all together in a big mass of, it's shit, all right? It's a shit map. I also didn't read the book, and I think that may have something to do with it. So, early editors for Doom were pretty simple. Back then, Doom was very popular, so most Doom editors cost money. It was very lucrative to make one. The best one at the time was an editor called Deep, downloaded by a friend, that limited you to 800 lines and 1,200 sides in the demo version. I never paid for it. It was $30 whole. I didn't have $30. Lines are walls and boundaries and room separators, and if those lines divided rooms, it had more than one side. To give you an example of how limiting that is, Episode 1, Mission 1 of Doom, arguably its simplest, smallest map, is 486 lines, 666 sides, which I think may have been intentional. But it was no problem. I mean, I read the book now. And with my refined knowledge on Doom gameplay and Doom mechanics and Doom Engine features, I made a map set for Heretic, which is a completely different Doom Engine game. One episode of 9 terrible, awful maps. And if that wasn't enough, I made a tool that I had a tool that could import music, so I added even worse music. MIDI arrangements of music from Super Nintendo RPGs, the Duke Nukem 3D theme song snuck in there, even Canyon.mid and Passport.mid, the ones that came with Windows, kind of snuck in there as well. You know, mercifully, I didn't have internet, so I didn't upload it anywhere. I only showed it to friends, but my friends seemed to like it, but I think they were more impressed that changing the game was possible and that they knew a guy who could do it. And one of those friends, the one that downloaded Deep, the editor I usually used for me, Bill, collaborated with me on something. The best WAD ever! Now, WADs are Doom's storage format. They contain all the maps and sounds and graphics and whatever that you want to add to the game. And we made the best one, so we thought, you know. 3 full episodes of maps, of which I did half. And all new music, mostly from Duke Nukem 3D and odds and ends that we found on the internet. And shitty new graphics that looked like crap because we didn't know how graphics formats worked. And since we were on America Online, we uploaded it to AOL's file servers. It had very limited scope. AOL servers were not internet at large, so only the people that could see it were subscribers to AOL. So I haven't really heard anything from it. Yeah, I haven't heard anything from anybody about that one. But it didn't really matter to me because I still wanted to make more maps. So for 1.5 years, off and on, I made something for Doom 2 when I was 13, Dimensions of Time. And at the time, it was my biggest release. It had 32 maps in it, what people call these days a mega WAD, because it replaced all the maps. You can complete the whole thing in about 2 to 3 hours because the maps were very short since I was still using that demo version editor. To make up for the difference in map length, though, I filled it with video game music and popular 90s music. And I'll tell you, you have not lived until you blasted demons listening to a MIDI arrangement of Blur's song number 2. I mean, you just haven't. You just haven't. Now, I had internet at the time, so I uploaded it to the id Games FTP, which is ftp.cdrom.com, where all new maps and mods for Doom end up. And I thought that was it. But then one day, months later, I received emails from people. A guy in the Netherlands, another from Japan, and another from Texas. I mean, like, people as far as halfway around the world went out of their way to tell me that they liked my work. Now, why do we create things? I think it's a means of communication. I mean, we want to educate others. We want to make something that benefits others. We want to show somebody something new or interesting to us. For me, in regards to Doom, it says to others, this is what I find fun. How about you? I mean, to think that we make something just to make things is disingenuous to me. Otherwise, like, why create? Why share? See, it's my firm belief that we as individuals seek validation. It's the thing that lets us know that we exist or belong. It's the thing that what we do has value, or that we're on the right path, or it's why people post things online looking for a like, or stick things on the bumpers of their cars. You know, validation doesn't have to be attention or praise or anything verbal or monetary. It could just be a tiny acknowledgement that somebody shares our crazy opinions or that someone values our work. And it's kind of an assurance that our time was not wasted despite our own belief that it wasn't. Now, not everybody needs validation, but I think I did. Because I guess I thought that I now had an audience. And I didn't really think of it too much at the time, though. So after making some additional lackluster Doom maps and maps for the Quake series, near the end of my high school career, which is about like year 10 through 13, I went to university, and I spent most of my time getting reacquainted with my programming skills that I've only begun to foster really early on in my life for about 2 years, neglecting the things going on in the Doom modding community at large. And then around 2003, this map called Void was released by Mike Watson. It required an advanced engine called ZDoom, and it contained enemies and objects from other Doom engine games, which was like unheard of at the time. It was insane. And maybe it was just the cool stuff that people were now doing, but I felt a compulsion to jump back into the fray, you know, because Doom was still around, and it kind of grew up without me. So I thought that maybe it was time for a return to see what I've been missing. Or maybe in a more selfish way, regain an audience that I felt I lost. So first I grabbed the most popular map editor, Doom Builder, which did everything right. You know, gone are the days of paid editors. The sky was my limit. No more 800 lines and 1200 size to limit me. And after a warm-up of sorts to flex my muscles on some new advanced engines, I released this thing called Xexis in 2006, which was received kind of lukewarmly. I think it was because of the red. Like, lots of red. Like, an unimaginable amount of red. And there was some green. And a new monster that was red. Like, this was no return to form. Like this was my first map ever. It was like my first map ever, except big, red, and really awful. And you know, it's not a triumphant return to form for Matt Tropiano, maker of amazing maps. You know, so I went looking for inspiration. And back then, Doomworld.com was one of the dominant Doom modding forums on the internet, and I think it still is this day, I believe. And the Community Chest series was a Doomworld staple, and they were full map replacements for Doom 2 that used a common Doom engine variant called Boom, which allowed for bigger maps and greater features. Now, the purpose of the series was to show off what the community at large could do. Newcomers and the old guard were kind of encouraged to make maps for it. That also meant everybody was kind of encouraged to put their best foot forward. Community Chest 3 was the current iteration, and I figured my chance to really shine. I mean, a chance to tell the world that Matt Tropiano, maker of Dimensions of Time, was back and here to stay. Now, over the course of a year or two, I contributed 3 maps to Community Chest 3. Simple Complex, which replaced Map 7. Leviathan, which replaced Map 30. But the most notable of them was Map 29, entitled For We Are Many, and it was the penultimate map in the set, so it was kind of understood that it had to be like big and amazing going into the final map. And it was. But by the end of making it, I realized something. I hated it. I hated its size. I hated that it was a drain to playtest. I hated that I mashed bad ideas and inspired ideas together in order to make a giant, inconsistent mess. And I hated that I went into making it with the attitude that it needed to be a centerpiece and not just another map among other worthy works. But ultimately, I hated myself. That I let my unwarranted need to prove myself run roughshod over my better judgment. But the strange thing was, I discovered it wasn't hated by others. In fact, I've seen several posters on the forum since then remark that it was one of their favorite maps. A few saying it's how big maps should be done. Perspective is kind of weird. There are 2 entirely different sides to every work. The creator sees the process of creation. Sometimes the process can be terrible, and it's all that you see when you go back to it. And if you care about your work at all, it's hard to not be your harshest critic. The audience only experiences the final product. And even when the audience is privy to the process, often they're not involved in the work. It wasn't easy for me to accept any kind of praise, knowing that I was dissatisfied with my work. I mean, it was just hard for me to just smile and agree, like to just say thanks, I'm glad you enjoyed it, and mean it. Maybe I felt that the pressure that I put on myself shielded me from criticism. Like if I hated my work most of all, like what words could hurt me, you know? I still hated making large maps though. So I started making a set of maps around 2008, a little while after Community Chest 3 was released, such that each map could be completed in about the time of a coffee break, giving it the oh-so-creative title, Coffee Break. That's my actual work desk, by the way. Tiny maps, tiny names for each, something quick and small, despite the relaxed constraints of the engine that I was using. But I realized around 8 maps into it that although I imposed a limit on myself, it was a false constraint. That it was a constraint designed to keep me in my comfort zone. Small maps were where I started. And using an engine that offered no limits, nobody truly grows if they're not challenged. Maybe I feared failure, that my last truly memorable project was going to be a mediocre map set that I made when I was 13, a hot red mess, or a big map that I outright hated. So I was looking for ways to leave the comfort zone. I put Coffee Break on hold temporarily and I joined another project called the Plutonia Revisited Community Project. It was meant to be an homage to the Plutonia experiment, which was a full map set for Final Doom, released in 1996. And like Plutonia, all of the maps had to be made over the course of 6 months, which is the length of time that Dario and Milo Casali made the Plutonia experiment. And it had to use all the constraints of the original Doom, which is called Vanilla Doom, if you've ever heard the term. I made 3 maps for it. And I was pretty proud of myself, me thinking that, you know, Vanilla Doom was somehow challenging. I was born in it. Molded by it. I didn't use enhanced engines until I was already a man. By then it was luxury. I'm glad that went over well. Sometimes a way out of the comfort zone goes looking for you. At this point, I've been getting a little bit more visible in the Doom community, and I was asked to participate in a project called Back to Saturn X. Yeah! It was going to be a multiple episode project that used an entirely new texture set in a new setting and intended to push the limits of Vanilla Doom. And although it was still Vanilla Doom, it was an entirely new set of resources, so it was good enough from a break from the norm for me. And when other members of the project heard that I could be contributing, they seemed happy about it, so I couldn't say no. So I agreed to make a map for it called the Blue Shadow, and would hear back later after the project was compiled together. Maybe this was the start of me finally making some things that I could be proud of. So I joined yet another project, and around the same time, Doomworld Forums member Snakes started a project called Secret Santa. I mean, we're all familiar with the concept of a Secret Santa, right? Bunch of people enter a pool, and each person gets a random person in that pool, and they've got to buy the other one a gift that they'd enjoy. For this project, you were assigned another mapper in the pool, and you had to imitate their style. Now, this was the ultimate get out of the comfort zone free card. But even though I was gung-ho about doing it, like deep down, I'm ashamed to say I was hoping for an easy target. I was praying that I would get somebody with a style similar to mine. And then when my target was selected, I got Chris Kassap. Now, the great thing was, I was familiar with his style. The problem was that he made big maps. The bane of my existence. But I didn't run away. I'm Matt Tropiano, the greatest Doom mapper ever. I can handle this. I'm not just some 2-bit hack afraid to try new things. So I built things, and I adjusted things, and I tested things, make sure everything was navigable and perfect. And in the end, Forsaken Overlook was done. It was big, and it took long to make and play test and mash together all sorts of ideas and influences. And even though I felt the painful echoes from For We Are Many, I didn't hate it. This map was the shit. After all, I know how big maps should be done. And one day I hear back from the lead from Back to Saturn X, still in development. He tells me that my map I submitted a year ago, a blue shadow, needed some changes. I said, no problem, I could totally do some adjustments. What changed? And he goes, well, the project is undergoing some stylistic changes, and in the middle of fixing things up, your map was altered kind of significantly without anyone telling you. So I go, okay, what does it look like now? And it went from this to this. Kind of a difference. And he wanted to make sure I was okay with the changes, but they still wanted to credit me for it, but was this still something I wanted to put my name on? I mean, in a lot of places, I could barely recognize it. I mean, yeah, it was still my map, but it wasn't as navigable. It was really complex, but it still fit into Doom's constraints. My old map wasn't very pretty, but you know, when I worked in the original Doom, I didn't have these newfangled tools that that people have these days. I mean, and the old map didn't really fit. I mean, how could it have been accepted in the first place? Why wasn't this an issue at the time? I mean, were they hiding something from me? Could I have even done these changes on my own? Was I even that good anymore? I mean, was I even good in the first place? And how dare they? How dare they change my work into something this inferior piece of... So I had to calm down for a bit. And I had to take a step back and breathe. What was I upset about? That they didn't tell me? I mean, it wasn't truly my property. I gave it to the project. After that, it's theirs. Or was it because deep down, I truly didn't believe I was worthy enough to be a part of the project? Was I afraid that after all these years, I didn't have confidence in myself? That at some point, throughout my growth as a mapper, my pride had taken the reins? What good is confidence if something this small could shatter it? What did that mean about how I felt about everything I've ever made? Did I even deserve the audience I thought I had? I wasn't sure what to think. I didn't want anything else changed, but I still accepted being credited, and I moved on. And a little later that year, I received a private message from a forum member. He told me about how much he enjoyed playing Dimensions of Time, that map set I made when I was 13. And how much it influenced him as a mapper. It's embarrassing that it took me a long time to learn that the most important rule on responding to feedback on your work is empathizing with your audience. I mean, if somebody saw it fit to spend their time playing something that I made that I was dissatisfied with and gave me praise when it was done, what kind of monster would I be telling them that the conclusion that they arrived at is invalid? Who the hell am I to tell them that the opinion that they arrived at all by themselves is worth nothing? It's not endearing or humbling, it's condescending. At worst, I'd be making them feel terrible about their happiness. So I told them, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I meant it. And then later that year, I got community recognition for Forsaken Overlook at Doomworld's end-of-year awards. So what did it matter about what I thought about my work? All this time hanging on my personal dissatisfaction when I should have focused on its impact on others. Perspective is kind of weird. So at some point in 2013, a prolific Doom community mapper and music composer named James Paddock released a 3-map demo of a game he was making in the ZDoom engine called The Adventures of Square. And I loved this little game. The crazy sound effects, the simple art, how everything exploded when you shot it. And I messaged him about it saying that if he needed help completing it, that I would be glad to contribute. And I was really anxious about asking, even though I had no reason to be. I mean, we were both familiar with each other's work. And he said, sure. And now I was making a game. So technically, I made only one map for it, but that wasn't all. The project suddenly took on more people, so we needed a project manager, and I did that. And then at some point, concerns were brought up about the copyrighted sounds we were using, so I became a sound designer to replace them all. And that meant the enemies needed more effects, so I started doing voice acting, which is something I always wanted to do. And once Jimmy had to go to university, somebody had to ensure that everything was playable and balanced, so I had to do that as well. And suddenly I was wearing a lot more hats than I was used to. I mean, I couldn't do all of these things. I could barely make maps. What was I doing? But I didn't give up. I guess I didn't want to let everybody down. And in a year's time, with plenty of sleepless nights around the end of it, we had one episode of the game finished and polished. And after that, we started submitting it to festivals. It appeared at Game City 9, and then the unthinkable happened. We got into the EGX Left Field collection. So that meant I needed to make my first international trip to England. I mean, I had barely left New Jersey. This was physically outside of my comfort zone. I mean, so I was extremely nervous, at times thinking I couldn't possibly go. But I'm glad I went, because I got to see people, real, living, breathing people, get to play it. And I saw the smiles on their faces, both young and old, and I got to talk to them face to face. And they told us how much they liked the game. And all those feelings from getting my first emails about my work came flooding back, as well as my confidence. And for once, I felt validated, like every bit of my amateur mapping career had paid off. But I didn't stop there. I attended more festivals. I was interviewed for an article in PC Gamer magazine. And in my travels, I met several more people that shared the same passion that I did about video games and what we do. And it was all because of Doom. So what have I learned from all this? Besides my issues with self-confidence and praise and seeking validation, I learned that you should never stop creating. Never stop doing things. And just don't be afraid of leaving your comfort zone, because you never know where it might take you. And I guarantee you that where it will take you will be better than where you were before. Always. Thank you.